Keir Starmer has just announced his new immigration policy. A major plank of the reasoning behind it is his claim that an experiment has been performed over the last 4 years on the British people, and that experiment was to allow unfettered immigration, and we can now see whether or not that has had an effect on GDP in the British economy. Many economists think that allowing immigration brings in fresh talents, fresh abilities, and should boost GDP. Keir Starmer doesn't. He says that if we look at the economy over those 4 years, immigration went up, but GDP flatlined. So there's no relationship.
On the growth question, I do think this is worth taking some time on, because the theory that higher migration numbers necessarily leads to higher growth has been tested in the last 4 years. So we've had the highest net migration when the last government lost control to nearly 1 million, and stagnant growth. And so that link doesn't hold on that evidence.
Is this right? Well, first of all, we should notice that nobody, politicians included, should be making sweeping general assertions on the basis of a short 4-year period. There are many other things that can affect GDP over a specific short period. However, let's take him at his word, and we'll take that 4-year period. That will be from 2020 to 2024, and let's look at the figures. We've got from the Office for National Statistics quarterly figures on immigration numbers and on GDP. Now, the government has mentioned that we shouldn't just look at raw GDP. What we should be looking at is GDP per person, per capita, as economists tend to say. But just to take per capita figures, which means dividing GDP by the number of people in the country, is not a particularly good measure either, because if a lot of people, say, decide not to work, then the number of people in the country remains the same, so GDP per capita remains the same, but in fact it's being produced by a small number of people. So productivity for any individual employee will have risen. What we should be looking at, to get a sensible idea, is GDP per employee. When we put these two things, GDP and number of employees and immigration figures together, we can get the following graph, which shows on the vertical axis GDP per employee, and on the horizontal axis the number of immigrants. We can see quite clearly that over that 4-year period there was a general upward curve. That is to say, the more immigration, the higher the GDP per employee. So, although this doesn't prove one way or the other the effect of immigration on GDP because of the problems that I've mentioned before, if we do look at this period, as Keir Starmer says he's done, the conclusion we can draw is in fact precisely the opposite to the one he stated. Immigration does correlate over that period with higher GDP per employee.